Hello again, everyone. I'm Dick Stockton, and welcome to Stockton, the podcast. I hope you've had or are having a great week. As a play-by-play guy, one of the things that you don't get to do during a game is one-on-one, long-form interviews with people. But with this podcast, that's exactly what I get to do, talk one-on-one with a guest, and not in some post-game short-form way, but instead I get to go in depth with whomever I can connect with, and it's the sort of thing I'll be doing on Stockton every week. Plus, I'll share stories, insights, observations, and opinions on topics in and around the world of sports. And I also get a chance to connect with all of you, and that means I want to hear from you. So head over to iTunes and subscribe to Stockton so you'll always get the very latest episode as soon as it's posted, and be sure to leave me a review because your opinion matters. Now, if you have an opinion or something you hear in any episode, or maybe there's a topic you'd like me to talk about, or if you just want to say hello, maybe you'll share your thoughts on a subject, and here's how you can go about it. Send an email to info@stocktonpodcast.com. Again, the email is info@stocktonpodcast.com. Or you can always connect with me on Facebook or Twitter @Stockton Podcast. Also, just to let you know, I'm going to wrap up every podcast with something I like to call Taking Stock, where I'll give you my opinion on one specific topic or news item that I think is worthy of a closer look. That's Taking Stock, coming up a bit later. Now, on to this week's episode, and let me just say, this is one of those that when it popped up on a schedule, everyone involved ring-fenced it as being one of those you just don't want to miss. My guest this week, three-time National College Player of the Year, two-time NBA champion, a two-time NBA All-Star, an NBA MVP, and an NBA Finals MVP. Oh, got to catch my breath here. In a 13-year playing career. He's also a member of the Basketball Hall of Fame and was inducted into the College Basketball Hall of Fame as well. He's a fellow broadcaster who in 2016 released a memoir titled Back from the Dead, Searching for the Sound, Shining the Light, Throwing It Down. Known in certain circles as the Grateful Red, he is none other than Bill Walton, a colorful figure indeed. When I think of the word exuberant, when I think of an athlete that I've known, or maybe in the history, who comes at you with a smile, life is oxygen for him, is Bill Walton, and is sincere about all of this. That's the amazing thing.
Dick, I spent half my adult life in the hospital. I've missed so much of everything. I have to make the most out of every living breath that I have. To be there on the ground, to have been in the unrelenting, excruciating, debilitating pain that just takes everything from you and just breaks all hope, all dreams, and then to get better. To be at the point now where I don't have the pain, where I don't have to take any medication, and to be back in the game of life. I truly am the luckiest guy in the world. And so my world is one of pride, satisfaction with my choices in life. Number two, loyalty. Do I care about anything that's going on and everything? And then number three, the gratitude of I am fully aware of how many people have sacrificed everything to give me the chance. Now, we jump back to pride for a minute. Nobody has made more mistakes in life than me. Nobody has failed more often than me. Now, none of those mistakes were willful. None of those choices that I made that turned out to be wrong were like, oh yeah, let's go do something wrong. I always tried to do the right thing, but it turned out to be wrong. And so as all my mentors, starting with Coach Wooden, would say constantly, Walton, you're just the slowest learner I've ever had. Will you please wake up? Will you please see the light? Will you please do something right one time in your life?
That's what made you and makes you special long after you were a basketball star. Let me ask you this. What mistake do you regret the most, and what gives you the most satisfaction today?
The biggest professional mistake I ever made was when I first joined the NBA. Because here I was growing up in San Diego with the most fantastic life ever, incredible parents who had no interest in sports, but they loved me more than they loved themselves. But I grew up in a non-business environment. My dad My dad is the son of educators and school administrators. He grew up in California's Central Valley, just in a very small town west of Bakersfield. Then he went to Cal Berkeley, and he was there, and he was a top student there, and English was his love. And then he got drafted into World War II, and he went to France and Germany and fought there and came back and never said a word about what he saw, what he did, what he witnessed, what he experienced. He came back, though, and spent the rest of his life, Dick, trying to convince people to get along. My mom, she was a librarian. My mom's still alive. My dad passed 13 years ago. But here was a situation where I grew up in this idyllic world of San Diego, where everything was beautiful and wonderful. Then I go up to UCLA, and it's just even better with John Wooden and J.D. Morgan, our athletic director, Chancellor Young, and Ducky Drake, the trainer, and then Greg Lee and Jamal Wilkes and all the remarkable players and people that I had the privilege of living with and being with and learning from there at UCLA. And then I joined the NBA. For the first time in my life, really, I encountered people who did not have my best interests at heart. But I did not have any sort of business sense or drive or interest. I wanted to be a basketball player. I'm a hippie. And I just wanted to go on tour with all the bands, the Grateful Dead and Bob Dylan and Neil Young. I wanted to read the books. I wanted to go hiking on the John Muir Trail in the Sierras. I wanted to ride my bike. And I just wanted to do all the things that I love to do. But I was unaware of the importance of business. And so early on, there was all these opportunities that I turned down, including the biggest professional mistake that I ever made in my life was when Phil Knight kept coming after me in 1974 and said, "Come on, Bill, come with me, come with me." And I said no. And oh my gosh, forever since, I've just been saying, what was I thinking? And when we get together with Phil now and his wife Penny and all our friends from the great state of Oregon and Lori, and everybody's laughing and joking about how it's all turned out. And please, everybody, read Phil's incredible book, Shoe Dog. They all look at me and they say, "Coach Wooden was right, Walton. You are the slowest learner we've ever seen." But in terms of the satisfaction and the joy and the happiness, that, my dream was always to be a part of something special. And I always saw, well, one of the things that I love so much about basketball and the job that David Stern has done. David Stern, the most important man in the history of basketball. But David Stern, he saw basketball as a vehicle to create a business, to make the world a better place. And that was what I lived as a child, because my heroes, they saw a culture, a world, a scene, a scenario that could be improved, and they were willing to do something about it. And so I had these athletic heroes, Bill Russell, my favorite player ever, and then Muhammad Ali, just the king of everything. And they were not into stuff. They were not into material accumulation or physical gratification. They were into this is important what we're doing out here. We're going to make a statement, and we're going to drive the world to a better place. And that's what I wanted to do all the time. And so through the foundation of my parents, through my first coach, who was just absolutely incredible, I can't tell you, Dick, today if my first coach, Rocky, ever knew anything about sports, but he sure knew life. He was our local fireman, and he had 3 children of his own. We all grew up together. This guy was fantastic. And then, as every little boy, every little child with a dream, there's always a voice, the voice in the ear that you find, and that shows you the way forward, that shines the light and just does everything imaginable for you as a young boy living this small life all by yourself. But you understand ultimately that there's a bigger picture. And for me in the early days, that was Chick Hearn. And then for the music world that came shortly thereafter, because my parents, they just love music. And we grew up in a musical household. My dad was a phenomenal musician, but it was classical music. But then I early on found the world of rock and roll, and that's what I just fell in love with.
Why the Grateful Dead? When did that first happen?
1967. It was in the advent of FM and extended play rock and roll on the radio, and we're sitting around listening, Dick, one day and just having a grand old time, and the music is just filling the air. We're just basking in the warmth and the glow and the happiness. And the DJ comes on after the jam. He says, "Now, boys and girls, that band, they call themselves the Grateful Dead, and they're from San Francisco. And I'm told that last weekend they had," this is the DJ talking, "they had a concert in San Francisco. So many people showed up that everybody just got in free. And I'm also told, boys and girls, listening today on this program, that the Grateful Dead are going to play in Los Angeles this weekend. And if enough of you show up, I bet you get in free." So we looked at each other and said, we didn't have any money. We had nothing. But we really had everything, because we had the hope and dream that tomorrow was going to be better. We had our health. We had the sunshine. It was just fantastic, Southern California, and the nature and the beauty. And so somehow we got a car. I don't think anybody had a driver's license or anything. We got up to Los Angeles. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any. We had shorts and tennis shoes and a T-shirt on, and we just showed up there, and sure enough, we got in free. We got up to the front of the stage, and we never left. It was fantastic. And the warmth, the love, the joy, the community, the nature, and again, a sense of people making the choice in their life to do what was right. And so when I look around and I see all these people who were, who were always trying to do good, and always trying to be that person, as so many people have always been there for me, to turn around and put that hand out and say, "Come on, Billy, you're coming with us." And for me, basketball, academics, that was always the easiest part of my life. My big challenges in life, Dick, have always been my orthopedic health. I was born with very bad feet, birth defects there. I tore up my knee when I was 14, had to have my first of ultimately 37 operations on my entire orthopedic musculoskeletal system. And then I broke my spine when I was 21 playing for UCLA. So that was my challenge, of trying to get healthy, trying to stay healthy, and from an orthopedic sense. And then the fact that I'm a lifelong stutterer and could not speak at all, could not say a word. I was so shy. I was so scared. And because of my speech impediment, I just never said a word. I was a straight A student, and I just loved to read. I loved to learn. I could write and take the tests and ace those all the time, but I just could never speak. And then one of your friends, one of your colleagues, one of your peers, Marty Glickman, just a king of all king in his era and day in the New York, northeastern part of the United States, just fantastic broadcaster, that voice, that spirit. Marty taught me how to speak. And when Marty sadly passed away, we went to Coach Wooden for a comment, and Coach was talking about Marty and his impact on the world and the social issues of the day and all the things that Marty did to make the world better. And then Coach wrapped it up by saying, "But you know what, at Marty Glickman, he taught Bill Walton how to speak, but he didn't teach him how to stop talking. And so, Marty, there's some unfinished business here you left too soon."
We're talking with the incomparable Bill Walton, the great, more than a basketball guy. He's every man. And he's got a memoir that you've got to read, Back from the Dead, Searching for the Sound, Shining the Light, and Throwing It Down. He did a lot of throwing it down during his time as a basketball player. Isn't it amazing that a guy like you had to have a coach like John Wooden? I mean, I don't know another coach where it would have been the same.
I chose Coach Wooden. I was lucky that he was willing to receive me and to accept me into his family. Because while I was Coach Wooden's easiest recruit, that's what I wanted to do, was go there. I became his worst nightmare, and I drove the poor guy to an early grave at 99. But here was, I love the coaches who are calm, who are understated. Motivation is not my problem. My problem is control and discipline and keeping it focused and the concentration on the execution and the delivery of the final product. And that's what he was really, really good at. And he was a master teacher who was willing to give up every aspect of his life, Dick, so that our dreams could come true. There was never, when we played for him, and I had I had a 43-year relationship with John Wooden from 1967 to 1970 when I was in high school, when he was recruiting me. And he did the best job of all recruiting me with the help of Denny Crum, who was the guy that put the teams together. And then I played for him from 70 through 74. And then the most interesting part was the 36 years after I stopped playing for him, because it was at that point when your eligibility was up and you could no longer play for him, then he became your friend. He was not your friend when you played for him. He had a job to do, and he never let anything get in the way. I mean, he gave up everything. I mean, his family suffered, his business suffered, everything suffered so that the players could have this chance, the chance to become great. And Coach Wooden was the first great player in the history of basketball, and he told us years after we stopped playing for him, all the stuff that we had to pull out, because when we played for him, he never told us anything about himself or anything else. He just told us about how we were going to become great basketball players. And in all the time we played for him, we never watched film. We never used the blackboard. We never had a play. Never called timeout. He mentioned the other team twice. In 4 years, he mentioned the other team twice. We never did any scouting or anything. We had no idea who we were playing against. We barely knew the name of the team. But the two times he mentioned the other players on the other team, Austin Carr, Notre Dame when we were freshmen, and David Thompson at the very end when we were seniors, we lost both of those games. Thanks a lot, Coach. But here was a guy who was just so driven to be that teacher. You know, he had great teachers himself, starting with his dad, Joshua, and then the teachers who he had along the way, and the way that he chose, Coach Wooden chose Piggy Lambert to go from Martinsville High School up to Purdue, when everybody around the country wanted him, but he said, no, I'm going to go play for Piggy Lambert, and then on and on and on. And then Coach, who was the most decorated person. I mean, he won literally every honor, every award, every accolade, but he was not into recognition. He was not into awards. He was not into commendation. He was into continuing the process of the education. And so
he wasn't that successful early on. I mean,
he coached at UCLA for 15 years before they won the championship. And then Walt Hazzard showed up and everything changed. And then right on the heels of Walt Hazzard was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was the just the absolute greatest. Now, my favorite player ever is Bill Russell. But Kareem, of all the guys I ever played against, was so far superior. And don't even talk about centers. I mean, when I was playing, the top centers of the day at the NBA level were Kareem and Dave Cowens and Nate Thurmond, just absolute exquisite players. But I grew up in the game idolizing Bill Russell because of the way Chick Hearn talked about him, and then Wilt Chamberlain. And Wilt was just so incredible, such a huge force of nature, inconquerable, indomitable, but the nicest person you've ever come across. I mean, Wilt was Magic Johnson, so far before Magic. But Wilt was not the self-promoter in terms of, hey, look at me, everybody. Wilt just went out there and he just did whatever he wanted to do, and like only he could do. He would make a decision to do something, and he would go out there and then do that. And then here was a guy who, whenever there was a bold and brash statement made by anybody, including Wilt Chamberlain, you kind of like scoffed and laughed. But when Wilt ever said it, never discount anything that Wilt ever said, because if he said it, he either did it or he could do it.
I wanted to ask you one last thing about John Wooden. And
one last thing. I thought we were going to have a talk here today. We're just getting started.
Oh, I know. I know you spent a lot of time. You visited him. Tell me about the last visit with Coach Wooden.
The last time was in the hospital, and it was very sad because, Coach's wife died in 1985, 10 years after he had stopped coaching. And he loved his wife so much. It was the only girl he ever dated, the only girl he ever kissed, although Coach was quick to point out that that was not the case with Nell. But he was so in love with Nell. And, I mean, we were terrified of her. I mean, because Coach was this very nice, calm, gentle guy, but, she was tough and she was fierce. And we were like, oh, my gosh, we would always think to ourselves as we were sitting around and being teenagers and being wild, crazy college students, we'd always imagine, what do you think Nell is telling John when he gets home from a day with us? But then Nell dies in 1985. Coach stops coaching in 1975, and we thought that, okay, he's already 75 years old when she dies. He won't be around much longer because she was the driving force in his life. He loved her so much. But then he just kept going, and he had lots of health scares, and tons of times we thought it was at the very end. But this guy was so tough. He was so fierce. We took to calling him the Energizer Bunny. And then it comes down to the very end, and he's 99 now. And we were at his house the day it turned. It was in February of 2010. And we had just come from breakfast at Vips, and there was a number of us around because we did whatever we could to spend as much time with him. And we were there that day, and he knew it, and we knew it, because he no longer could do the things that you have to do to keep moving forward in life. And so that day, 2010, we already have our cell phones at this point, although he never had a cell phone. He never had an assistant. He never had somebody to do all the work for him. Realizing that this was the beginning of the end for Coach, I took my cell phone and I quickly got Larry Bird on the phone, and the two guys from Indiana, along with Oscar Robertson, just at the very top of the mountain in Indiana basketball. And so I put Coach and Larry on the phone together, and Coach went over and sat in the corner of the room. And Coach wasn't speaking a lot that day, but Larry was carrying the conversation, and they were talking about the beauty of Indiana and how much they loved it in basketball and how crazy Bill Walton was and everything. And I could just see the tears coming down the cheeks of Coach Wooden's. And then over the last 4 months, between February of 2010 and early June of 2010, when he actually did pass, it was very, very tough, because he was a proud man and he was fierce, and he never wanted anybody to see him in a condition of not being totally on top of everything. But then I go into the hospital there at UCLA on the very, very end, and we know it's time. And I walk into the hospital room, and the guy's already dead. He's lying there on the bed, and he just has no color. He has no muscle tone to his body at all. He's not moving. He's got his arms folded across his chest. The chest cavity is not going up and down. You can't even see any breath coming out. The guy's already dead. And so I walk over there, and I bent down, terrified that I had already missed him, and I didn't have a chance to say goodbye. And so I bent down, Dick, and I kissed him. And I said, "Coach, thank you, Coach. I love you, Coach, and I'm really sorry for ruining your life." And he kind of shuddered, and he kind of like twitched and responded a little bit. I said, "Oh my gosh!" And he opened his eyes, and he couldn't have seen me. He couldn't have seen anything. It was just kind of glazed over. And he said, "Who's that? Who's there?" In very soft, faint tones. And I reached down again, I bent down again, and I whispered in his ear, "Coach, it's Bill Walton." And Coach sat up in bed as much as he possibly could, propped himself up on his elbow, and he looked at me, and he shouted out throughout the entire room in the hospital, "I thought I was through with you, Walton. What are you doing here?"
Yeah, too much.
And then he laid back down, and that was it. And no, man, I just feel awful, because I had no idea. I had no idea what we had. And he was so kind. He was so loving. He was so gentle. He was so warm. He was so giving. He was so selfless. He was so humble. And he just gave everything that he had, he made me who I am, and what he did for me, I was not able to do for him. I was not able to reciprocate, and that's a terrible feeling and a terrible burden.
Well, you know what? You always consider the other person, and that's anytime anyone meets you, it's never about you, and it really isn't. And, I just want to say this. A lot of people, as false humility. You don't have false humility. You really have absolute humility and honesty in your life, which is, why I cherish you as a friend here, and
I'm
we're going to get a beat.
Dick. I'm the lucky one because I know you. I got to meet all these incredible people because of basketball, because of music. And just think of all the songs of Jerry Garcia and Neil Young and Bob Dylan.
Your favorite.
John Fogerty and all these different guys, and Carlos Santana and the Eagles and the Rolling Stones and John Lennon, and just absolutely an endless list of Crosby, Stills, and Nash and the Beatles and all the guys who are still singing these songs today. Just fantastic. And so many of those songs were sung to me, for me, and about me. So when I think of Jerry Garcia, and he was, Mission in the Rain, all the things I tried to do but only did halfway. Bob Dylan, ringing the chimes of freedom, living the series of dreams. And it was just absolutely incredible. And Neil Young and the constant songs, and John Fogerty. And because of this extraordinary life that I've had the privilege of living, I've got to meet all these guys, all my heroes. The only heroes that I've had who I haven't had the privilege of meeting were Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, who were both gunned down when I was 15 years old. And so this was a life, this was a time of like, yeah, we're winning, we're changing the world, and then all of a sudden, bam, bam, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, gone, dead. And then the fight has to start all over again, and the tragedy, the horror, the misery. But one thing that we learned from John Wooden was that things never end. You stop doing one thing and move on to the next, but ultimately we have to come back and make sure the job continues to get done, and that's where we are today, starting over one more time. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I've got a chance to play in the game of life today. Here we go.
I want you to tell me about the miserable time when you were on the floor. I want you to talk about that. I want you to mention, Bill, the term suicide, and I want you to talk about Lori and what she meant to you and means to you.
So I've had this incredible run of horrific health challenges. My feet, I ground those up into dust. Both my ankles are fused. I had to have my first surgery on my knee in 1967. I dragged that bad leg around, crooked, bent, not working at all. Dragged around for 46 years before I had it replaced about 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years now. And then I broke my spine at UCLA, and I lived with that, and just the unrelenting, debilitating, excruciating nerve pain that just saps every bit of life from you. And then in February of 2008, it just all came to a head, and I went to the ground, and I could no longer move. My spine collapsed and failed, and here I am on that ground for years on end. And it was the hardest and worst thing ever. I could not move. I could not function. I could not eat, think, sleep, and worst of all, I was not getting better, and there was no hope and dream that it was ever going to happen. And my life completely fell apart. I lost everything. I lost my job. I got fired. I lost my health insurance. I lost my dignity, my self-respect. Things were so bad, and I was so crazy, because you do get crazy when you're in that state. And I was going to kill myself. And never discount people killing themselves from spine pain. More people kill themselves, Dick, from spine pain than from anything else, any other health malady. And so here I was, and my life was just not worth living. And my angelic wife, Lori, I mean, just this angel of mercy. I'm the luckiest guy in the world to be married to her. And I told her, I said, Lori, get out. Go now while the getting's good. She stayed. She stayed. Loyalty. And she and the doctor and all the people who would not let me quit. My family, my friends, my doctors, they would just call every day, and I'm just lying on that floor. And I am on that floor for an interminable number of years, and it's just when things are going well, the metronome of life goes too fast. When things are going awful, the metronome of life just stops. But there's nothing you can do about either one of them. And so here I was, and she stayed, and every single day they would always say, Bill, don't give up. Don't give up, Bill. You can make it. You can. And then slowly, just from nowhere, it started, and that was. That would have been probably, I don't know. My surgery was 7.5 years ago. It was a year or so after that, and it was just incredible, the way it turned. Once it turns and once you start the process of climbing back up, that's the easy part. But the wait, and that is the hardest part, and that's where you realize and where you really learn life's greatest lessons. Because I never thought that I'd be pain-free, and I never thought that I'd be happy in love. But I have both of those right now, and that's why I'm the luckiest guy in the world. And that's why when that sun comes up over the mountains east of my hometown of San Diego, where I still live, I just jump out of bed and say, let's go. I've got so much work to do, and I can just think back to this incredible book that David Halberstam had me read early on, which was Huey Long by P. Harry Williams. And he was a professor at LSU, and Huey Long was dominant there in Louisiana. And the closing line of the book is with Huey Long, who was doing everything he could to make the world better. They gunned Huey Long down. And so he was lying on his deathbed. And Huey Long, he said his last words as he looked up at all the people who loved him and surrounding him as this guy is just dying right in front of everybody in the arms of the doctors, and they can't save him after the gunshot wound. And he looked at everybody, and he looked up to the ceiling of the rotunda in the state capitol there in Baton Rouge, and he said, please, God, don't let me die. There's so much more to do. And that's the way I try to live every day of my life. I got a chance. My chance was provided to me by the sacrifice and discipline, commitment, and love of other people. I've got a duty, obligation, and responsibility to take that and pass it on to who's coming up next behind me.
Bill, do you believe in God?
Absolutely. I pray every day, cry every day, and and I go out and I talk to God and I see God, and oh man, I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
And we are lucky that Bill Walton is in our life. We're talking with Bill Walton, the phenomenal basketball player who's extended his life in basketball well beyond that. A guy who loves life, and also the father of Luke Walton, who's many of you all know is the coach of the L.A. Lakers. What does that mean to you, and do you go through each game grinding with what happens and with what he does and all of that?
Lori and I are the proud parents of 4 children, and we have 8 grandchildren, and there's more coming with every phone call, and that's great for us. And to see the success of the children and how far they've come, because I was a dad, think of my life growing up with my mom and dad. Dick, there was never a night in my life until I went to college that both of my parents were not at dinner in the same seats, in the same chairs, at the same table, every night at the same time for 17 years before I left for college in September of 1970. That was not the life that I lived, and that was not the culture and situation that I presented to our children, because as a player who was chasing my dreams, as the broadcaster chasing that new dream, most unlikely dream of all, I was gone all the time. And so I can remember as I was packing up to go on yet another road trip that the boys would look at me and say, Dad, you have to leave town again? And then I can remember when the boys would, when I would be able to go and be the dad that I had, be the dad that I wanted to be, the boys would say, thanks for coming, Dad. Thanks for coming. And that just tears at you. And to see what our children have been able to do. Adam, fantastic, doing just a great job. Adam's 41 now. Nate is 39. Luke is 37 and coaching the Lakers. And Chris is the youngest at 35. And to see how great they are as human beings, as business people, and as parents and as husbands just makes me the proudest and luckiest dad on earth. And now when I watch them all in their own individual circles, because they're all totally different, but one of the things, Dick, that makes me so proud is how they genuinely like each other, and they're happy for each other's successes. Because selfishness and greed are the root of all evil, and as well as lack of honor. But that really comes back to selfishness and greed, and that all leads to anger and hatred. And so in this joyful world that I live in, backed up by the music as my foundation, backed up by the really good health that I have right now, to be able to see these guys chasing their dreams. I mean, it's tough. Think of your own life, think of your own parents, and think how your parents were able to create something for you, but then my life could not have been more different than my parents' life. And then to have our children go in and chase their dreams. They all played college basketball. Some of them played international ball at the professional level. Luke got to play 10 years in the NBA. Now he's coaching the Lakers, and he's been part of phenomenal situations. So it is just really, really a great source of pride, joy, and happiness. And yes, when I do watch these games, I do tend to yell at the television set, and I do tend to get emotionally involved and committed. And I'm a lot happier when the Lakers win.
What a commentary. I was listening to the way you answered this question, and I think that that may be Exhibit A about who you are, because you didn't jump to talk about Lakers and Luke. What you did was, because he's number one perhaps in the public eye, it's your whole family, all of your children, and what they have done. And you went to that. And that did not go unnoticed by me. And you did wrap up by mentioning Luke and the Lakers. But what you were saying is, look, one of my sons, happens to coach one of the great teams in the NBA, but that's not what it's all about. It's about all my kids, and that's how I interpret.
Dick. I'm a team guy. I grew up in that culture. That was my first coach. That was my dad and mom. That was Chick Hearn. That was John Wooden. It was all about the team all the time. That was Jerry Garcia, Bob Dylan singing to all of us about the team, the community coming together. And I've always been uncomfortable being a team guy. I was part of some of the greatest teams ever. UCLA, we started there 46 years ago. The records still stand to this day. The Portland Trailblazers, where I played my best, and you called all our games, and it was just fantastic. The Boston Celtics, just incredibly great teams. That Blazer team, the youngest team to ever win the championship, an unlimited future that was just derailed by my health problems. And then the Boston Celtics, where I was able to limp through a brief stint with this spectacular team with all these phenomenal people. Again, the Celtics created, formed, nurtured by Red Auerbach, all about the team. And so here I was, part of these great teams, and yet the constant forces creating the tormented conflict in my life about people wanting to promote me as an individual when I knew that it was my teammates, when I knew that it was the sum of all of us together. The nicest thing that anybody ever said about me as a basketball player was that I helped my teammates play better. And when I look at my hero, Bill Russell, when I look at what Magic Johnson did on the basketball court and continues in life today, when I look at Steve Nash, these guys who were like my favorite players ever. They may not have been the best players, but they were the guys that I loved so much because of how they played the game. Larry was the greatest player I ever played with. Kareem, the greatest player I ever played against. But when I would watch the games and I would see little Stevie Nash, come on. He's like a comic book Dennis the Menace type character, right? Little tiny guy, can't run, can't jump, but he just completely wowed and dominated the entire sport of basketball. Basketball, has been defined by the winners of the genetic lottery. And here was little Stevie coming out there and there was no player no player that I've ever watched in basketball that I oohed and awed more than little Stevie Nash, and just the way he conducted himself, and always willing to step to the front, as all the great ones are, and say, "Hey, I'll take care of this."
You know, we talked to Alex Rodriguez, and it was interesting with him because in the year that he was suspended from baseball, he said that was the year, and it was more recently than you were always that way, that he finally said, you know, forget about numbers, forget about me. He became more team-oriented, and he said that his one regret is that he didn't have that earlier in his life, but he finished that way.
You don't know what you have until you don't have it anymore. And the joy that I live every day, having grown up in San Diego, the greatest place on earth, is also a huge problem. Because I thought growing up that every place was just like San Diego, where it was, 80 degrees every day, and all of the girls were walking around in bikinis, and it was just like, let's go to the beach and let's play basketball, let's go to the library, let's go to school, let's play basketball. And then, oh my gosh, and then I moved to UCLA, and it was freezing cold up there, and windy and foggy and dark. And then I moved to Portland. Oh my gosh, when I got to Portland, I was fully convinced that the sun had burned out and life as we knew it was coming to an immediate end. But the whole sense of having something, losing it, and then getting it back, and saying, oh my gosh, I made so many mistakes. I didn't know, I didn't value, I didn't appreciate, I didn't respect, and now I've got a chance to make up for that one more time. And that's the way I try to live every single day. I mean, that sense of, I got a chance to play in the game of life. I got a chance to climb on the mountain. I got a chance to be a part of something special. And that's why when I was lying on that hospital bed, going to have my spine rebuilt, reconstructed, replaced, regenerated to hopefully give me that chance. I'm lying in this bed, and I have no idea if I'm even going to come out the other side of this operation. This is a big, don't ever think this. How many people in your life, Dick, do you know who jump up every morning and say, man, I love my health insurance company? Or number two, man, I think I'll just go down and have spine surgery today. This is big-time stuff. And so I'm
very few.
I'm lying there in the bed, and the doctor's standing there. He's patting my hand and trying to reassure me, and he's telling me he's going to do whatever he can. He's going to do his best. There's no guarantees, but I'm going to do whatever I can to help you, Bill. And so tears were streaming down my face, and I just reached over with what little strength I had. And the doctor, I heard him order the drip, and I knew from all the other surgeries that, hey, when that drip starts, you don't have much time. And so I could hear the anesthesiologist from the other side of the room counting 10, 9, 8. And so I reached out and I grabbed the doctor, Dr. Steve Garfin. I grabbed his forearm with whatever strength I had, and I had none left because my body had completely debilitated. And so I had my hand on his forearm, and I looked right into his soul, right through his eyes. I said, please, Doc, please fix me. Please give me one more chance. Please give me one more chance to play in the game of life, to climb on the mountain. Please, Doc, please allow me to ride my bike one more time. And then, bam, I was just out. And I woke up. I don't even know when I woke up. This was the hardest thing ever. Oh, my gosh. But now I'm all better. And here I go, and I'm riding my bike, and I'm broadcasting, and I'm busier than I've ever been. I'm happier than I've ever been. And I'm doing my best to celebrate the great gifts that have been given to me. I truly am the luckiest guy in the world. I know Dick Stockton. I've been able to sit next to you during those games and dream and visualize and scheme and plan, and let's go do something fantastically fun. And that's what you have always done for so many of us who have you've been able to create that world, that atmosphere, that opportunity where, yeah, we've got this chance. Now let's go do something with it.
Well, we are the conduits, the people who broadcast games between the performers on the court and the fan. That's what we are. And if we can get out of the way and just make it an enjoyable time for those people who toil 9 to 5 every day in a job and come home and want to sit down and watch Bill Walton do a broadcast. It's a special thing, and I hope people have watched his games and go, because, Bill, you do it differently than anyone. And, maybe my one regret is that, for me, is that I haven't had a chance to do a game with you, which would be tremendous.
We're going to have to do that. We're going to have to remedy that. And that's our challenge. That's our job.
We will. Bill, you are a joy. I think for you, the best is yet to come. And I'm honored to know you, and thank you for coming on our podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Dick. You're the greatest ever. Thanks for being the best friend that a guy like me could ever hope to have. Thanks for shining the light. Thanks for being the light. Dick Stockton, we love you. Dick Stockton, here we go. Play on.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for coming on with us. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.
We love you, Dick. Thanks for my life.
Thank you. Well, now it's time for Taking Stock, and how timely it is to talk about a much-discussed topic about baseball even before spring training began. It's something that will be apparent as the season moves along. It's the time of games. Baseball is not unique to this problem, but it is a problem because times, no pun intended, have changed, and the attention span of all people, not only sports followers, have changed as well. The NFL is trying to find ways of shortening games without affecting the play on the field, maybe shortening commercial time. In basketball, both college and in the NBA, the final few minutes of a game can be agonizingly long with constant fouling and timeout decisions. But baseball is where it all seems to start. Believe it or not, I remember a long while back when games actually were played in just over 2 hours. Yeah, 2.5 hours max. Now it's rare that a game ends in under 3 hours, closer to 3.5 or more. Baseball Commissioner Bob Manfred declared that eliminating the 4-ball pitch on an intentional walk would speed up the games. That's kind of minor in my book. And there are other things like time limits for delivering a pitch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think I have thought that what could really get the job done, and it may not be original, but I believe it would speed up games like nothing else. Let's eliminate the batter stepping out of the batter's box after each pitch to adjust his wristband or whatever. Let's limit pitchers stepping off the mound. And I remember when a batter was waiting for a pitch, it would arrive, the catcher would throw it back to the pitcher who would get the sign, throw it again to the batter who remained in the box. Of course, there are circumstances when there has to be a delay before the next pitch. We can work that out. But overall, let's enforce this one thing. I think you're going to see a difference. So that's it for this episode of Stockton. I want to thank my producer, Peter Lyon, and our sound engineer, Scott Person, for their help with this episode. A reminder to email us at info@StocktonPodcast.com. Once again, info@StocktonPodcast.com. Stockton is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people. I'm Dick Stockton. So long, everyone.